mother of two, and she joins us now from the International Space Station. Hello, Katie.
Hello.
This is so cool, isn't it? Hey, Katie, I want to
welcome
ask you
aboard
a
the space
question.
station.
This is Leah. Look at this. Wow. Are you going to be okay, or? There's a delay, too, so we got to take that into consideration. Katie, can you hear me?
You know, we Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I'm not the brightest person, so...
Hello.
This is so cool, isn't it? Hey, Katie, I want
welcome
to ask
aboard
you a
the space
question.
station.
This is Leah. Look at this. Wow. Are you going to be okay, or?
Thing we do, we're weightless, and all the things we're doing it with are weightless as well. So you start off with that teeth brushing thing, and I have to say, you know, spitting, that's going to be a problem. So we swallow our toothpaste, and the day goes weightless from there.
As you have seen, when we have finished brushing our teeth, we can't use water to spool our mouth. So we just get rid of the toothpaste in a small cup like this, which of course after a while we exchange.
I have to say, you know, spitting, that's going to be a problem. So we swallow our toothpaste, and the day goes weightless from there.
And then what is your average work day? Is it like a real 8-hour day, or? And then what do you guys do? You sit around looking out the windows, or what do you guys do? This is what I want to know.
You know, seriously, we live to look out the windows because it is simply amazing to look out. And, you know, every day is different looking down at the Earth. It depends on the weather. It depends on the lighting. Big, big international venture. And every day, actually, the day begins the night before because I look at the schedule, see what I'm going to do, and I study up and just try to understand what experiments I'm going to do. And I can actually show you one of them. One of them's coming right at me right now.
What's that?
So before I show you this, let me just show you something else. Oops. It's going to come back to me, okay? I want to show you why we do these experiments, and that is because this is a bag of water, okay? And I'm squeezing. Let's see. So it's a brand new bag of water, and so my straw was a little crimped there. And I'm going to come a little closer, and you can see this giant blob of water. And we're getting to see in space, what do liquids really, really want to do? Spitting, that's going to be a problem. So we swallow our toothpaste, and the day goes weightless from there.
Wow. That is amazing.
That is amazing. So I'm curious, because I know you have kids at home. How do you stay close to your kids?
Oh, wow.
So water is also very dangerous on the space station because we have a lot of electricity. So we need to be very careful not to spill it. So we just
I brought a little Hobbs up in space with me, and I bring Hobbs to do experiments, and I take pictures and send him down to the ground so he understands what I'm doing every day. And I did that while I was training for this mission as well.
That's so cool.
My research of the last year has led me to the conclusion that not even low Earth orbit is possible, that the International Space Station is a hoax, and all manned space travel is fake. For the inside of the International Space Station, there are a couple of zero-gravity tricks that they use to fake it. The first is they have a complete mock-up of the International Space Station built on the inside of an airplane, and that airplane does a bunch of rises and falls. It does a upside-down parabolic trajectory, and that simulates zero gravity. The other main way they simulate the zero gravity is with suspension in front of a blue screen, and they use that trick for extended periods of time, for longer than 45-second segments. But they can't move around as much. They can't do the acrobatic flips and rolls in the extended mode. So there's full motion mode where they can fully move around, and that's faked in a plane, and then there's suspended or extended mode where they're suspended by wires in front of a blue screen. They don't move around as much, but they can make the scene last for a longer period of time. In this scene, Chris Hadfield bends down in order to adjust something, and you can see on the back of his shirt a couple of upticks on either side where you would expect wires to come in on either side of that harness in order to support it. Of course, they've computer graphicked out the supporting wires. You can't actually see them, but this isn't live from space. They're often portraying that this is live. Of course, these things are fully choreographed and edited in advance to make sure that there's nothing too obvious that you can see that gives away that this is a suspension in front of a blue screen hoax. The other thing it shows is that this is not raw footage coming to us. This is edited stuff. This is supposed to be a legitimate space program. This is supposed to be the International Space Station, and we should be able to see whatever's going on. But they edit things. In one extended mode scene, Chris Hadfield on the right is going back. He's going back, and then he just stops. That's an odd motion. You would expect if this was true zero gravity that you have to support yourself, you have to stop yourself on both the top and the bottom of your body as you're drifting back. If you just stop yourself with your feet, then your head will rotate backwards. Conversely, if you just hang on at the top with your hands, then your feet will still keep moving. You have to support yourself at both the top and the bottom of your body. But his hands, Chris Hadfield's hands, aren't touching anything. He just goes back and then he stops. And that's odd. You can see a sort of a harness sticking through the T-shirt of Chris Hadfield. It's a harness that's around the waist. That's how they're supported. Also notice that Chris Hadfield has the habit of bringing his knees up. That's because his stomach muscles aren't as strong. He doesn't have as much midriff strength as some of the others who are able to elongate their body and make the hoax look a bit more realistic. He's constantly bringing his knees up because he's not as strong as the others. Occasionally, though, the others bring their knees up too. Notice that in the extended scenes, which seems to be done in front of a blue screen, like if you have a look at this guy going back towards the screen, there's some strange shadows there, look like they're CGI'd in. Using computer graphics, they edit out the supporting wires and edit in these rotating floating objects. The extended mode is much quieter than the full motion mode. In full motion mode, you can actually hear the sound of the jet engines, the engines of the airplane. In every single scene of full motion mode, in every segment of the International Space Station, you can hear this loud sound, the sound of the jet engines. You could argue that it's the air conditioning system. Not even an office air conditioner is that loud. And why is there a loud sound in every segment of the International Space Station? That's because no matter how soundproof you make it, you can't filter out all of the sound of the jet engines. An airplane is just too noisy. You can put noise-cancelling headphones on when you're on a plane, and that doesn't stop the sound from getting through. It muffles it. They also use microphones that don't pick up very far away. If you have a look at this scene here, you can see that when the microphone's in the middle, pointing towards the guy in the middle, you can't hear the sound of jet engines as much, but when the microphone goes to the guy on the side, you can hear the sound of jet engines. An amazing model. Gee, why would you build the International Space Station out of a bunch of long, thin segments that can easily break at the joints? So there's their fairly realistic view of the rest of the International Space Station.
Yeah, I wish, but you know, we work together as an integrated team, and it's really a lot of fun to work with Rick and Misha.
And what's the reaction been like in Japan?
Actually, they really liked watching the change of command ceremony last Sunday, and I had a lot of feedback, and like to many international partners of the International Space Station program, to Japan it means a lot to have its own representative, to have a chance to command the International Space Station.
Now have a look at their feet. There's stabilization bars, blue stabilization bars. As he moves away from there, he moves forward. And once again, he hangs on to the bar on the side with his left hand to stabilize himself.
Like jelly beans, but then how to eat these in space? This is truly challenging, because as soon as I open this bag, all of these are going to want to come out. And so, I'm going to have just a couple come out.
Japan, and that brings us to Koichi, who's in the Japanese lab Kibo. So Koichi, walk me through what you're working on in this lab.
Another aspect of the illusion of space travel is spacewalks. These are faked inside a swimming pool. It's a custom-built swimming pool, and that's a great way to fake zero gravity. About 6 months ago, in 2013, a gallon of water leaked into one of their spacesuits in a matter of seconds. NASA doesn't really have a proper explanation for how on earth this could have happened. There shouldn't be water leaking into someone's helmet and a person almost drowning in space. How can you drown in space? They now wear snorkels to make sure that they don't drown in space. How can this be happening? A snorkel in space? There could be some water in the porous plate sublimator. When they were on the moon, they supposedly had about a gallon of water, but that cooling system is supposed to be well away from their head. There really is no sane explanation for why a gallon of water would leak into someone's spacesuit, unless you realize the whole thing is faked inside a swimming pool. In this scene, you can see the Chinese spacewalk, and you can see a bubble coming up from the guy's suit. How do you have a bubble in space? Space is supposed to be a vacuum, not a swimming pool, but it's obviously just a swimming pool filled with water. Obviously, there would be some equipment that they could only fix from the outside, but a lot of these spacewalks, it seems like equipment they easily could have configured to be accessible from the inside of the International Space Station, it seems more like an excuse to get out and show their other space trick, which is the faking of spacewalks in a swimming pool. In this vid, you catch a glimpse of someone wearing a scuba tank. Scuba tanks in space? Snorkels and scuba tanks in space? They act like a spacewalk is just a walk in the park, like there's very little danger involved at all. They're looking through the spacesuits. Oh, here's a spacesuit, we're going to go for a spacewalk. As if there's no danger at all, like they don't care. They don't care! But there seems to be an abundance of equipment on the outside of the International Space Station that constantly requires repairing, which makes for a good TV spectacle and is inspired by movies like Sandra Bullock's Gravity. And after Gravity came out, they of course had to do another spacewalk to fix some emergency, some piece of equipment that their lives depend on that amazingly they can fix every time.
Right, so the snorkel, as I mentioned, this is actually a part that we can change out on the spacesuit. It's part of a waterline vent tube assembly, which is actually what runs from the backpack of the suit, and it's what hooks up to the liquid cooling and ventilation garment that the crew members wear. So normally these tubes will be passing water that's providing cooling around the crew member's body. So some smart engineers on the ground were able to figure out, hey, it's a similar diameter to a snorkel that you have for scuba diving. So what if we're able to, each waterline vent tube assembly has 2 of these tubes. So by just sacrificing one of our spares on board, they were able to come up with a way to just snip off the ends and then file it so that it's not rough in the crew member's mouth, and then apply Velcro. We already have Velcro inside the suit, which is what holds the drink bag up to the front part of the suit. So they were able to come up with this ingenious idea to hold it in.
Here the helmet gets hit on the International Space Station, and a bubble rises into the pool. What's even more ridiculous about them filming spacewalks in a water pool, and spacewalks are impossible, is that the women for the hoax perm their hair. Here she's in front of a blue screen, and the background is not moving, the cable is completely still, and in real life there would be airflow in the space station would be making adjustments that would not stay fixated. It's just a screenshot, and they just put it in the background. It's blue screen, and her hair is permed for this ridiculous hoax. In 0G, hair is moving through air. It behaves like hair moving through air. It does not say fixated into position. And yet, when you watch them on the International Space Station and you look at their hair, it always stays in a particular position relative to their head, and it doesn't flop around naturally like it's supposed to. And here is Perm Lady Head. I mean, look at her. She looks like Medusa. She looks like she has fixated snakes coming out of her head. It's permed like that. Here's another idiot. Her hair is completely fixated. It's a perm. It always springs back into that particular position. It's ludicrous. I mean, look at this idiot. She must be a Freemason or something. Because sometimes that's who they get to do these hoaxes. They're sworn to secrecy, and they're fucking pieces of shit.
Here are a few scenes from the tour of the International Space Station that they take you on. And I noticed that there's no airlock between sections. This means if there's an air leak in one section, they will be affected in all sections.
This is Houston ACR. That concludes the KCRG TV portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from KTBC TV.
What it is. Our favorite NASA video?
It is a real honor to be able to touch base with the International Space Station, and that's what we're doing right now, visiting with Commander...
You see anything funny there?
Commander on the International Space Station.
There is a little wipe that you might have seen as they switched characters. Nothing unusual about that necessarily. They changed interviews. They just had a time switch, let's say, between that character and this character, who appears to be on a harness for sure, but we're not going to worry about that. We're not worrying about the harness. We're just worried about the wipe. I'm going to show it to you again. I believe they're on a green screen. In fact, it will be hard to dispute that that is a green screen in the background where the flags are waving. The flags are going to be our main clue here to what's going on and what I'm pointing out. Watch the wipe. Okay, so changing times. Yes, one time to a new time is what we're looking at because people don't appear in white.
And all manned space travel is fake. The main reason I believe all manned space travel is fake is because the re-entry vehicles are fake. I'll go through all of that in detail. First though, let's have a look at the International Space Station. I want to talk about some of the anomalies I see there. For the inside of the International Space Station, there are a couple of zero-gravity tricks that they use to fake it. The first is they have a complete mock-up of the International Space Station built on the inside of an airplane. And that airplane does a bunch of rises and falls. It does a parabolic, upside-down parabolic trajectory, and that simulates zero gravity for traditionally about 30 seconds at the most. I think they can do it to about 45 seconds, judging by the length of time of these segments. They have to do a hard break, or they have to put the camera to the wall or away from a person, or they can link scenes together. They're quite clever in the CGI. It's difficult to tell all of their tricks. The other main way they simulate the zero gravity is with suspension in front of a blue screen, and they use that trick for extended periods of time, for longer than 45-second segments. But they can't move around as much. They can't do the acrobatic flips and rolls in the extended mode. So there's full motion mode where they can fully move around, and that's faked in a plane. And then there's suspended or extended mode where they're suspended by wires in front of a blue screen. They don't move around as much, but they can make the scene last for a longer period of time. In this scene, Chris Hadfield bends down in order to adjust something, and you can see on the back of his shirt a couple of upticks on either side where you would expect wires to come in on either side of that harness.
Laundry piles up. Is there a way to clean clothes in space?
No, it takes a lot of water, of course, a washing machine and a dryer. We don't have anything like that. So we just wear our clothes till they wear out, and then you throw them in the trash, and the trash is like a little unmanned resupply ship. And when it gets full of trash, then we close the hatch, and it undocks and backs away and falls down into the atmosphere. So your dirty laundry actually gets incinerated in the atmosphere.
So take this woman, Sunita Williams, has supposedly been on the station for 200 days. She's never had a proper shower in that time. She's never laundered her clothes. She just wears her clothes for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, a month, and then throws them out. In other words, she stinks. She's horrible. She's clammy. She's disgusting.
Living on the International Space Station, you might be 6 months without a real shower. Essentially, you have a sponge bath is what you do every day. And yeah, you do get pretty sweaty because you're working out. But surprisingly enough, when the shuttle crew came to pick me up, was one of my first questions, do I smell? And they said I didn't smell, and they said my hair didn't look greasy, so I was pretty happy with that.
Now check this video out. The whole video is about a minute long. I said 45 seconds before was the maximum for full motion mode. It may be more like a minute that they can do this full motion zero gravity mode, because then the airplane finishes its parabolic trajectory. It has to dip down for a short period of time. There's double the gravity. Anyway, have a look at the end of this, and there's a strange motion to the center. Take a look at the way it moves. It kind of skips out of her control a couple of times. First it dips down and then up a little bit, and then at the end it goes up a little bit, and she kind of looks a bit embarrassed, like she's been caught putting her hands in the cookie jar. Oops, I hope you didn't see that. No, we didn't see, Katie. Just keep the beautiful smile on your face, and that'll distract us from the hoax. They supposedly urinate into these funnels. How do they keep it clean? How do they stop it from being encrusted with dried urine? You can't use water to clean it. You could, but you'd be wasting a precious resource, and then there'd be dirty urine-filled water floating around the cabin instead of ordinary water.
Hello, my name is Bailey. This question is for Chris. What was high school like for you?
Well, it was the 1980s, so the music was different, the hairstyle was different, the clothes we wore were different than today, but probably in 5 or 10 years it'll be the same. And in school, I was just like you, probably all of you there. I tried my best. I didn't always succeed, didn't always do well, but I put my best effort into school. Math and science were kind of my favorite subject. I didn't really like English in reading too much, but I've since grown out of that, and I enjoy reading now. And I played a lot of sports. And all of that happened in a little town called York, Maine, across the United States from where we're talking to you right now.
A little town called York, Maine, across the United States from where we're talking to you right now.
Hello, my name is Steve Owen. I'm a teacher here at Riverside Prep. I'd like to ask you about the stress associated with the long periods in the space station. I'd like to ask Karen, what is the training that you get to cope with that stress and related psychological issues?
Well, for psychological issues, actually, when we are selected as astronauts, we go through quite a vigorous psychological screening process. You certainly don't want somebody who comes up here and has a breakdown or is claustrophobic. But also, we have, well, like Chris's background as a Navy SEAL and Luca's background as a test pilot clearly prepare them for high-stress situations. I could also argue that going through the process of getting a PhD can be a high-stress thing as well. And so generally when people get to the point where they're applying for this job, they've been through several things in their life that are high stress.
You have to do several months of training in Star City, Moscow, and what you do is you learn the zero gravity tricks. That's what the training is for. They will tell you, oh, it's training to handle contingencies on the International Space Station, and if someone gets sick, you have to get in the Soyuz and quickly hurry back to Earth, or if you have to do a spacewalk. They have to hide in Star City, Moscow, because if they're photographed anywhere, it would ruin the whole hoax. They have to stay very hidden. In fact, they basically have to live in Star City, Moscow, as they would do on the International Space Station. So there are a whole bunch of frozen meals prepared for the astronauts to be consumed when they're on the International Space Station. In fact, that'd be ideal to give to people who are hiding in the basement of Star City, Moscow, pretending to be on the International Space Station. Another aspect of the illusion of space travel is spacewalks. These are faked inside a swimming pool. It's a custom-built swimming pool, and that's a great way to fake zero gravity. About 6 months ago, in 2013, a gallon of water leaked into one of their spacesuits in a matter of seconds. NASA doesn't really have a proper explanation for how on earth this could have happened. There shouldn't be water leaking into someone's helmet and a person almost drowning in space. How can you drown in space? They now wear snorkels to make sure that they don't drown in space. How can this be happening? a snorkel in space? There could be some water in the porous plate sublimator. When they were on the moon, they supposedly had about a gallon of water, but that cooling system is supposed to be well away from their head. There really is no sane explanation for why a gallon of water would leak into someone's spacesuit, unless you realize the whole thing is faked inside a swimming pool. Things seem to finally be coming together with the moon landing. We were there on the surface of another planet. You could see it on TV. Well, first it was projected onto a silver screen, and then the TV cameras were allowed to film off the silver screen, because obviously you wouldn't want the real footage. I mean, if you want to go back and look at the real footage of the initial moon landing, you can't, because it's been taped over by NASA, and no one was fired, no one was punished. Of course, they want to get rid of the evidence. Now, we haven't been back to the moon because we never went there in the first place.
Check that out. Sun sets, space station gets brighter. This is just a bunch of bogus garbage. You can only see it if you speed it up. You won't notice it in real time. Look. What could be, if the sun is setting behind, what could be brightening the space station? And notice how they changed the scene too. It cuts. That's because this is bogus garbage. How is the space station, supposed space station, visible after the sun has set behind a supposed round Earth horizon? How? Look at that. Sun sets, space station gets brighter. But notice the sun has been disappearing, supposedly. But yet you can still see this. What's shining from here to reflect light off?
Yeah. They always have huge smiles on their face, like they're having a really good time, even though they could die at any second. Another curious aspect is that humans emit dust with time. Their skin dies and drops off. That's what makes for most dust inside a person's house. There'd be so much dust building up on the International Space Station, and yet you never see them go around with a dust buster, with a small vacuum cleaner sucking things up. What do they do with the dust? Well, supposedly there's a trash disposal thing in the form of a re-entry vehicle, which strangely burns up on re-entry, even though the ones with humans inside supposedly survive re-entry. That's a very curious contradiction, but they have a trash disposal capsule that they put their trash into, but they never talk about the dust. They never talk about the solid waste from the supposed space-age sewage system that they have. That's another strange thing, is supposedly they have a sewage system. I don't know how they cram it into the International Space Station. Perhaps it's in the walls of the station, but they never talk about the smell. It'd be impossible to avoid the smell of a sewage system in the walls of the International Space Station because they're trapped inside this tin can. It's completely sealed from the vacuum of space. You could have any number of super filters and try and get rid of the smell. It wouldn't work. They never talk about bringing bacteria up in order to replenish the bacteria that's in the sewage system. They never talk about bringing all of the extra oxygen up that you'd need to let the bacteria process the sewage. In fact, what they must do is simply store their feces in the cupboard. There's all kinds of motions being translated to the International Space Station through these blue handles everywhere. They could spring a leak between segments easily. There's no airlock between segments. They don't do laundry or have showers, and they're incredibly uncomfortable the whole time. They don't have access to proper medical treatment or facilities. They have to routinely go outside to fix equipment because they like to put stuff on the outside of the International Space Station that can only be fixed from the outside. So in short, this International Space Station is a suicidal hellhole. It's an awful place to visit. Every second their life is in danger and they could easily die, yet nothing ever goes wrong that they can't easily cope with and fix given the incredibly limited set of tools they must have up there. And they act like they don't care. The International Space Station is the worst place in the world to be, and yet they act like it's the best place you could be.
Hello, and welcome to the International Space Station. I'm Katie Coleman, NASA astronaut, MIT graduate from 1983.